Quick heads up that, like an absolute goose, I threw out the recording of me drawing Jeff the Landshark and our main character for this episode. I can still show a progression of how this art was made, just in a very different way than usual and much faster than usual. I'll have that going at the beginning, but I also drew 3 other characters for this episode, so that can be the main meat of this video. Well, of course, I'm telling the story for today. Sorry for the mix-up, but I hope you all enjoy anyway, so let's get into it, shall we? Let's go! Hit like, if you want. Subscribe, if you feel like. But either way, enjoy the show. Alright, I'm taking things over, and whoever is reading or listening or whatever will just have to deal with it. If I am cutting in partway through a story in progress, then we clearly have a problem. The only person who should be narrating this, what I'm pretty convinced is a young adult novel, is Waru Umaerk. I might not care about much, but I do care about who's telling my story. See, it dawned on me after a chat with my buddy Alsaya yesterday that I might not be the main character of my own freaking story. I mean, she came to me telling me she wanted to try and get a bunch of kids together at our school to team up with kids from that goody-goody school, the Trismegistus Academy, to take down our headmistress. That does give off more main character vibe than what I've been doing. If Alsaya is the main character of this story, I'm gonna have some serious words with that spirit guide dork who reincarnated me into this life. Maybe I should have just stuck around to see what was up with the alien invasion happening in my last life. Going back isn't an option now, though. I'm even having some weird urge to internally monologue things that happened previously, which means that either the writer of this story is some hack who dumps exposition on people on page 1, or there were chapters before this that I wasn't narrating. Who the heck is so much cooler than me that you'd want to listen to anyway? Ugh, what do I really have to cover here? You read the previous chapters, didn't you? Why do I even have to... Ugh, whatever. My name is Waru Umaerk, and I go to an objectively horrible school called the Ludum Academy for Fearsome Fighters, or LAFF. That's probably going to pump out a lot more supervillains than superheroes. It's run by an actual psychopath, Elloise Ludum, who, honestly, I am kind of vibing with. I mean, she's the worst and basically just murders kids by tossing them out into the Little Lands to get eaten by monsters if they can't keep up, but to me that just keeps things exciting. It's the kind of place I know I'd want to read a book or watch an anime about. And what do I care, this life isn't my first one, so no big deal if it's a bit crook. Anyway, we're all in training to compete with this other school, and in our latest messed up class event, my friend Alsaya Lamani got tricked into an obvious double-cross during our combat training in the underground cavern coliseum. We were each given belts with 3 glowing beacons on them. We had to steal more from other students until we got to 8 beacons, and when we did that, we could scram and not wait around for the full 8-hour runtime. You can only get 1 beacon off someone at a time, and if you drop down to 0, then something bad and spooky would happen to you. I ditched mine in a hiding spot right away so I could see what exactly that was, but then quickly noticed Alsaya getting tricked into the previously mentioned double cross by a literally slimy dude named Sammy Slazar and a stony gal with a tail named Vinda De Mar who can make these humanoid fiend things spawn out of her to help her fight. So even though I had some beasties coming up on my tail for being down to 0 beacons, I decided to step in and help Alsaya out. We good now? Recap done? Good. Let's get on with it. The cackling laughter of those cartoonishly creepy-looking Laughing Luduls was headed right for us, but I was pretty sure I could take out Sammy and Vinda before those things reached us. I mean, as to be expected from a story like this one I've been reincarnated into, I was born the specialist little boy in my whole universe, with abilities that are pretty overpowered compared to the other kids here. I had some real generic chosen one vibes from birth, helping start my theory of the kind of life I've been shoved into. There was even a whole prophecy around me being the someday savior of my world. I'd suggest whoever scribed that to go double check their crystal ball, but if they were from my world, they're probably not around and kicking anymore. At least my powers aren't quite as boring as just being an obvious Superman ripoff. I mean, I'm closer to being like a knockoff Goku with some major limitations. But the limitations actually keep things interesting. I watched enough One Punch Man in my last life to know being too overpowered isn't all it's cracked up to be. But jeez, here I am exposition dumping before I've even gotten to the good stuff. I guess that is kind of an easy trap to fall into. Anyway, let's throw some fists. Of the 3 lights I can spawn to hover around me to activate my powers, I just called in the yellow one to my chest to activate my flight and speed. I'd destroyed Vinda's cronies, but the debris from them was drifting back to her, and she'd be able to spawn more fiends soon. Sammy had made his purple slimy hand bigger, probably to try and grab me out of the air. It was cute that he thought he'd be fast enough for that. I shot straight towards Vinda, saw the hand coming for me, and easily flew around it. Vinda swung her tail, but I just batted it aside with my forearm. It hurt a little more than expected, but not enough to make me show it. I caught her by the neck and flew down the tunnel to slam her into a wall. I grabbed one of the 4 beacons off her belt. I'll be taking that. I tossed her to the ground and dodged around another swipe from Sammy before flying back over to him and bashing my palm into his nose before he could turn it to goo. I heard a nice clean crunch as I hit it, then snagged one of the beacons off his belt. That's what you get for playing Alcya like that, Slimy. I swiped my leg under both of his to knock him to the ground. I considered laying into him more, but noticed the laughter was getting louder faster than I expected. I shot back down to where Alcya was anxiously looking toward the sound of Ludum's approaching creeps. I handed Alcya back the 2 beacons those turds had stolen from her. I told her, "You can get out of here if you want. Vinda and Sammy are probably smart enough to know not to mess with you again. At least today. Plus, sticking around me probably isn't the best idea, seeing as how I have a date with some of our chuckling buddies." She whipped her head to look at me with a hilariously confused expression. "You can't seriously want to fight Laughing Luduls." I shrugged with a smirk. I mean, fighting a few of them in here is a lot different from being chucked out into their territory for hours at a time. I think it'll be fun. She groaned. "You're nuts, but if you're fighting them, then so am I. Vinda and Sammy are probably going to try and take a cheap shot at you while you're dealing with the Luduls anyway, so somebody has to have your back." I probably would have been fine, but Alcya was some of the best backup you could get at this school. At the top pace I'd seen her move with her super speed, she was even faster than me at my best. Her durability was meh, but she was pretty good at not getting hit, so that was rarely a problem. Unless she fell for a dumb trap like she had with Sammy moments ago. Her being here at least meant I could focus more on the Luduls. Which was good because something really weird about them caught my attention pretty quick. One of them was green and yellow and sprinting like a demon along the wall. It had the usual creepy grin of the Luduls and had glowing green oversized fists. I mean, it seems to me like everyone in this life I've been reincarnated into, including myself, kinda has oversized hands for some reason, but this thing was a cut above. The other Ludul bounding along a bit slower next to it was a weirdly feminine looking one with a massive tail, buck teeth, and one funky hand that sorta looked like a slingshot. I was honestly already getting whiffs of Marvel Rivals copyright infringement, but the third one popping up really locked that in. I flicked my finger and the yellow light came back out of my chest. My feet dropped to the ground and I was just about to call in the white orb for some energy projection attacks when I noticed the stones ahead of us slightly rippling. Something was in there. Instinctively, I called in my red orb for strength, and the second I did, a chunky, grinning shark burst out of the ground and lunged its teeth for my head. It instantly gave me flashbacks to late-night gaming sessions in my last life. I smacked my palm into the shark's lower jaw to close its mouth, and in one clean move, gripped it and hurled it over my head right down the tunnel, slamming it into Sammy. That also gave me a glimpse at Vinda, making 2 new fiends spawn off her body. Alcya was fight-ready and about to charge in, but I could already feel myself worrying about her getting hurt. That is exactly why I didn't want to team up with anyone at this school. I didn't want to have to worry about anyone else's safety in this life. Plus, it wouldn't be very main character-like for me to get Alcya killed while trying to help her out. I mean, if she did die, that would at least mean she wasn't the main character, because who kills off the main character partway through a story? But still, letting her die wasn't on my to-do list. Plus, at this point, I was getting sketched out that this story my life is being turned into was going to face serious legal issues if Ludum is making Laughing Luduls for us to fight that are really messed up Marvel ripoffs. I mean, I don't know what universe this story of my life is being published into, but my story doesn't exactly strike me as a Disney production with rights to these characters, so whoever's writing this better lawyer up. I don't want my life story getting pulled from shelves for something like having a vomit-inducing Squirrel Girl monster trying to tear kids' heads off. I mean, I guess Ready Player One got away with having tons of pop culture nods, but from what I remember, Ernest Cline wasn't making nasty-looking monster knockoffs of other people's characters in his book. I tried to not think about that. At the end of the day, my responsibility was to beat the snot out of these things, not to worry about getting sued over them. I turned back just as the definitely not Iron Fist Ludul sprang off the wall towards me with its fist flying from my face. Before I even had to react, Alcaya sprang into its path and hammered it in the shoulder, knocking it off course. It reacted quickly though, moving with the spin of its body to kick Alcaya in the head, knocking her back towards the shark. I caught Alcaya by the arm, spun her around in a circle back toward the big-fisted Ludul again, so she could give it a swift kick in the head back, and smash it into a wall. After that, Alcaya swung over to my other side, and I let her go. I rolled my shoulders. "You can seriously bail. I know how much you hate these things." She grunted as if irritated I'd even suggested that. "No, we're in this together now, and like it or not, I know more about the Luduls than you do. The punching one is the Little Pugnus, the shark is the Little Salachi, and the slingshot one is the Little Squirrus." Normally she'd be right about her knowing these things better, but I'd played enough Marvel Rivals to have a pretty good understanding of what these specific ones could do. You'd better believe there was no chance I was letting that shark freak snatch me up from below and find a cliff to spit me off of. The slingshot-endowed Little Squirrus got close, leapt into the air, and fired a large stone right for me. I easily leaned my head out of the way, but it rebounded off the ground behind me. Luckily, having been a Squirrel Girl main briefly, I knew to expect that. I whipped my hand around and caught the ricocheting stone before it could hit me in the back. Alcaya sprinted under the Ludul's feet as it was about to land and tackled its legs so it would slam face first into the ground. Unfortunately, it tucked and rolled, sprang up, and somehow manifested another rock to fire into my face. This time, I didn't dodge. I just took the hit, then swung back my fist to punch. Unfortunately, just as I did, my arm was chomped between the jaws of the shark from behind. It was strong enough to swing me to the side and smash me into the wall. Again, I was more annoyed than anything. I ripped my arm free just to have one of Sammy's big gooey purple fists punch me in the side of the head. Before I could recover from that, a bladed tail swiped across my face from Vinda. After those strikes, I noticed the shark was gone, but immediately after, it burst out of the wall behind me, bit my shoulder, and drove my face into the dirt. From the ground, pinned by an infuriating grinning gremlin, I said, "Alright, everyone done showing off what they can do? Good, 'cause it's my turn." I grabbed the shark's face and sprang straight up, slamming it into the stony ceiling above. I let go and punched it just hard enough to move it aside so I could grab its tail as we started to fall. I whipped it around in a circle and threw it at the newly spawned fiends Vinda had created, making them shatter again. Before I landed, I flicked out my red orb and called in my yellow. My descent stopped just above the ground, and I floated for a brief second as a flurry of green fists flew for my head. I dodged around each one before catching the Little Pugnus by the neck, zipping up into the air, then flying it straight down into the ground. I flicked my finger again, the yellow orb left me, and the white one came in. That one was my favorite. Bright, white energy emanated from my elbow down to my palm, and I fired a beam of glowing light into the downed Ludul's head, driving it farther into the dirt. I caught a glimpse of a rock headed for my head and rolled aside, then aimed both palms up at the slingshot Ludul. Beams fired from both, hitting it in the head and shoulder. It flipped back through the air, so I swapped in my flight power, shot over, and caught it by the leg. I flew it towards the shark as it was readying up to leap at me again. I hurled the Little Squirrus into its mouth, swapped to my strength, and hammered both fists into its upper jaw to make it chomp down. The Little Squirrus gave one final shriek, then went limp and fell from the shark's mouth. The shark then took a step back and tried to dive into the ground again, but I snagged it by the tail before it could. I pulled it back out and grabbed its head. I was about to tear it in half when its body went intangible and it fell through me into the ground. I guess Ludum had made this monster to help us prepare to fight those Maverick-class dorks over at the Trismegistus Academy, since I'm pretty sure one of them had powers sort of like this thing, but still, that didn't change the fact that it was also blatantly a freaky knockoff of Jeff the Landshark. I was trying to track its movements while Alcaya had gotten a second wind and gone after Vinda and Sammy. Without the fiends to help them, Alcaya was doing pretty well. She was pounding them with her fists even faster than the Little Pugnus could swing. Speaking of which, that thing had surprisingly gotten back up from the pounding I'd given it. It looked like the green light that spun around it was healing it. So, again, still an Iron Fist ripoff, but also, I guess, prepped to fight that healing kid from Tahe. She may be a psycho, but Ludum does know how to get us trained up for some tough fights. I switched to my energy projection again and brought my hands together to do my own off-brand Kamehameha and fired it towards the recharging Ludul. Unfortunately, it sprang out of the way and started bouncing off walls. I tried following it with the beam, but was just carving through the ceiling and walls. It was infuriatingly hard to hit. With my speed, I could have kept up, but I couldn't have two powers active at once. I just kept trying to get it. And a certain shark menace must have thought that'd make me distracted enough to get the drop on me. Luckily, it was very wrong. A set of jaws sprang up under my feet, ready to snatch me. Immediately, I turned my beam downwards. Before I could get bitten, my blast burned right into the little Salachi's throat. Very satisfied with my hit, I said, "You may be a pain in my butt in the game, but in real life, you're nerfed compared to me." It gargled water, energy, and its own horrible laughter. Its body went fully tangible, still halfway through the ground, making its flesh merge with the stone. Then, it just stopped moving. I then saw a fist flying right for my face, about to smoke me, when, out of nowhere, it just stopped.
Will I get in trouble for having Marvel-inspired Laughing Luduls when the Trismegistus Academy book comes out? Probably not. But talking about books I have out, my interconnected anthology book about the competitors of a superpowered sports fighting league called Vigilants is now available on Amazon, in ebook, paperback, and hardcover. And it's got full-color designs of the characters inside, as well as some bonus art at the end for some other books I have coming out in the near future. Or if you just want hard copies of a bunch of my monster art, you can check out Monsters of the Multiverse, with tons of my best dragons, demons, and beasties of all varieties. Both are linked in the description, but now back to more Trismegistus Academy. Let's go!
The little Pugnus just floated back away from me and stared at me. I didn't know what was happening until I turned and saw Alcaya behind me. My eyes darted down and saw that she'd clipped a beacon to my belt. I guess we were only targets for the Luduls in here when we had none. I rolled my eyes. "I don't need a timeout, Alcaya, I can finish this." I reached to pull the beacon off, but she smacked my hand. "Stop it, Waru! You might be crazy tough, but even you're not invincible. I appreciate you helping me, but if you're in on the plan, then you've got to be able to take help from me too. We need each other." I looked down at her belt. She had 6 beacons, meaning she'd stripped another 2 from both Sammy and Vinda, who were now nowhere to be seen. She must have scared them off by getting them each down to 1 beacon left. "Just take the 7th, find your 8th quick, and be done, Alcaya. I can handle myself," I said, reaching for my beacon again. Once again, she smacked my hand. "But I can't handle you getting killed. You're the only person at this school who isn't a total pain in the butt, Waru. You're only kind of a pain in the butt, so let's do this together, please?" It was kinda cute seeing Alcaya actually showing she cared about me. Honestly, I tried to put a bit of distance between us because I sort of had the hots for her, but that felt pretty creepy. I mean, technically I was only 16 or 17 or something, and she was 15, but when I died in my last life, I was 25. I mean, if I am right in my theory that I've been reincarnated into a young adult novel, then I guess most of you reading would look past that. I mean, you're the same crowd that was cool with a 100-year-old vampire getting freaky with a high schooler, so it's not like you people have any high moral standards I need to worry about. Still, felt a bit crook. Plus, I genuinely did like working alone, not having to deal with anyone else's feelings or safety. Since this wasn't the first life I could remember, I didn't feel the need to get too invested in the lives of the people here. When my own universe in this life was destroyed by demon monsters before I came to the LAFF, I didn't even feel that bummed about it because I hadn't really grown that attached. It was kind of relaxing not having to care about anyone but me. Unfortunately, the fact that I was already considering wanting to work with Alcaya suggested something irritating to me. It seemed to imply that my supposed character arc in this book that is my life was going to be something as generic as learning the power of friendship. So if I just cut that off early and started working with her more intently now, maybe that would mean we could skip over the whole bland life lesson garbage. The other thing to consider was the fact that I did genuinely like going to this horrible school. It was fun and overtly evil in a corny way, and the lack of safety for the kids screamed young adult novel to me. I mean, it's got lands outside of it full of dangerous monsters where we're not supposed to go, unless of course we get in trouble and teachers just decide to send us out there as punishment. Hogwarts called. It told us to stop copying its homework. I mean, sure, that Tahe school was obviously better morally speaking, but the kind of kid that would want to go there is the same kid who would pick an Autobot over Decepticon toy, right? I mean, no offense, but if you'd skip over the toy robot that turns into a tank or a jet for a robot that turns into a sensible minivan, then I'm sorry, but we can't be friends. My point is, the Ludum Academy for Fearsome Fighters is way cooler than Tahe, but teaming up to take it down from the inside, that could be pretty fun too. I let my shoulders slump. Fine, we'll work together, but I still get to finish off this Ludul. She rolled her eyes back at me, but smiled enough to show that we had a deal. I pulled the beacon off my belt and handed it to her. She stayed back for a tag team if I needed it, but it didn't take much for me to finish off the last one. As soon as it was out, I heard more laughing down the tunnel, so I quickly clipped back on the beacon. Alsaya gave me another 2, then I took her back to where I'd stashed my 3. Unfortunately, they weren't there anymore. She gave me a judgmental look and I just shrugged. Hey, you're the one who wanted to team up with me, remember? That means getting my power and charm, but also my lack of giving a crap. Luckily, it didn't take much for us to hunt down some other students to face off against and strip of their beacons. With Alsaya using her speed, I could stick to just strength and energy projection. The more beacons we got, the brighter our belts became and the more students came for us. But even still, it was only an hour and a half into the game when Alsaya and I got our 8th beacons. That made us the first people to finish. After that, all we had to do was get our completed belts to Professor Kekuat. I knew it wouldn't be as easy as just handing them over though. This school was too messed up for that. I was kind of hoping they'd have us fight something like the Little Conus to finish up. I'd nearly gotten smoked by that thing the time Ludum had chucked me out into the Little Lands for stealing a full cake from her personal kitchen. Totally worth it, by the way. I've been wanting another shot at it since then. What we got as a final challenge instead was close, but not quite that. Between us and Kesar Kekuat was a pretty scrawny-looking Ludul at first, but we held back knowing it was probably tougher than it seemed. I took a shot at it with my energy projection from afar, hit it in the face, and knocked it right off its feet. We waited a second, and Alsaya was about to move forward, but I held her back a little longer. We were both glad I did because it started to thrash on the ground. Green veins started coursing through its body, and I immediately knew where this was going. It started getting bigger and more muscular until it slammed its fists on the ground hard enough to shake the cavern all around us. It leapt up, cackling in a deep, angry laugh as it revealed its new, hulking stature. I was ready to test out my strength against this thing when a new figure made me jump, speaking quietly next to me. Mind if I go first? Both Alsaya and I whipped our heads to see a girl called Katas, with her own full belt of beacons. She was tall, lean, quiet, and carried a pretty sick-looking star blade. It had 4 2-foot-long blades sticking out of each side in a circle, and she gripped it in the middle. I hadn't seen Katas in action much, since she was the newest member of our class, but from what I had seen, I was pretty sure the only reason she hadn't cracked the top 7 to represent the school yet was because of how new she was. I was about to interject that I wanted the first swing, but Alsaya said, "Go ahead." I assumed she was also curious how this girl would handle herself in a fight like this. Katas nodded and thrust a hand forward. She suddenly vanished, but 3 streaks of white smoke burst forward towards the little Ira, which is apparently this thing's name. Even I couldn't tell which smoke streak Katas was in. The bulky Ludul smashed its fist down onto one and crushed through nothing. It swung a backhand at another and, again, hit nothing. But before it could swipe at the third, Katas burst from it into the air above the Ludul. She hurled her weapon in an arc behind it. It turned to follow the weapon's path as it curved towards it, but Katas darted straight down in another puff of smoke. The weapon suddenly teleported out of its path back into her hand, and she sliced it down across the Ludul's chest. She seemed like a pretty sweet assassin-type build to me. I was impressed, but again, I wanted my shot at this thing. I activated my own strength and stormed head-on towards the Ludul. Katas saw me coming and leapt over the Ludul, likely using me as a distraction to get a hit from above. The little Ira took the bait and shrieked at me with green energy billowing off its back. It swung its fist up and smashed it down towards me. I thrust up both arms to block, and the fist hit me hard, but not hard enough to put me down. My body crunched a crater into the ground beneath, but I kept my footing and held the arm off. I know for legal purposes I shouldn't refer to this thing as being the Hulk, but still, holding off a blow from something this Hulk adjacent felt pretty sweet. Katas took her shot, cutting a gash into this thing's back, but it remained focused on me. The Ludul raised its fist again, but surprised me with a foot thrust into my face instead. I was hit, but caught it to keep myself from flying back, then thrust my arms upward. I lifted the thing right off the ground, swung it over my head, and slammed it back into the stones. It started pulling itself up, but Alsaya darted in and hammered some rapid punches into its face. It swung an arm to grab her, but in a streak of smoke, Katas dashed in and sliced through that very arm. With the three of us going at this thing, it only took a couple of minutes for us to get it to finally shrink back to its resting size. There, Katas finished it off with a clean swipe through the waist. When the fight was concluded, Katas nodded to both of us and quietly said, "Thank you for your assistance." I sneered. I think you were the assistant and we were the leads, but you're welcome anyway. Alsaya elbowed me in the side. We walked our belts over to Kekuat, who was clearly annoyed at how early we were done. "Congratulations on finishing so fast. Your reward is to run 2 hours of drills in the defense chambers." Alsaya threw her arms up angrily. I kinda shrugged it off. I didn't mind defense practice so much. It mostly just meant standing in a baseball-like batting cage getting various things shot at us that we had to dodge and block. Katas stepped closer to Kekuat, then whispered menacingly, "Your treachery and betrayal will not be forgotten, Kekuat." He nodded. "Good. Keep that fire in you, and maybe you can try killing me when you graduate. Now get out of here." Katas sped up the stairs quickly. Alsaya and I trailed behind and gave each other a similar sort of glance. We were probably thinking the same thing. Hearing another student openly threaten a teacher was rare around here, so maybe she hated the headmistress and this whole school too. This gal could be a prime target for joining this barely existing plan to take down Ludum. Of course, that was only the second most pressing question on my mind. The first was, do those Marvel Laughing Luduls mean that Elloise Ludum plays Marvel Rivals? And more importantly, is she hiding some sick gaming setup in this place? Cause if so, the second we take her down, I'm taking over that room for myself.
I hadn't planned on working in any pop culture stuff to this series, but I've been playing so much Marvel Rivals that I couldn't resist. But anyway, if you enjoyed the story that you heard in this and you want to hear the Trismegistus Academy from the beginning, I'll link the playlist. Or you might want to check out one of my other ongoing series, like Fear of the Demon Hunters, which the next 2 episodes on this channel are going to be the community redraw from that, or Starseed Psyche, which is even available on Spotify, and is my personal favorite story that I'm writing currently. But besides that, that's all for today, except of course for ending this video on some kind of positive or inspiring note, and the thought I want to leave people with today is a quote I read this week from Layla Hormozi, who simply said that confidence in public comes from discipline in private. The more you build up skills you care about in private and build up your own personal self-worth, the easier time you're gonna have being confident out in the world, interacting with other people, because you know that you're good or getting better at things that matter to you. I hope that's inspiring. I love you all, and I'll see you all in the next episode on Monday. Goodbye.